talking about performant and accessible Angular applications as PWAs. First of all, I want to thank OneSignal. OneSignal is my employer. If it wasn't for them for giving me time during the week to prepare the talk and for paying for the travel and expenses, I wouldn't be here. So thank you. And of course, ConnectTech. Thank you so much, guys, for making this event happen. Super excited to be here. This is my first ConnectTech conference ever. So who am I? I happen to be that guy. I think that's a very good picture of me. Not true in real life, but you know, it is what it is. I'm a Google developer expert on web technologies, and Angular, I actually hate the title expert, just because there's always someone is always smarter than you. I'm also a Auth0 ambassador, Postman Supernova, Chulu champ, AWS community builder, Google Woman Tech Maker, and media developer expert at Cloudinary. So anyone knows what a PWA is? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, so what's your name again? Mario. For you, what is a PWA?
In general, it's a website that allows you to like download the site into an application in your cell phone. That's what I understood.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. So let's look at the actual definition. So a PWA stands for Progressive Web Applications. PWAs are applications that have the capacity to be installed in your device, right? Long story short, in my personal point of view, a progressive web application is a regular website or a regular application with superpowers. That's my personal point of view. You might differ. And who uses PWAs? Tinder. So every time that you are swiping right, you know, if you see me on Tinder, make sure you swipe right. They use PWAs, Microsoft, Google, Samsung, Starbucks, and many other companies. So you're not alone if you're using PWAs. So if you're curious about learning more about PWAs, check out this website. So I'm actually gonna open it up for you guys. It's actually really cool because all these companies are using PWAs. So, you know, I hate when people say, oh, nobody uses PWAs. That's actually not true. If you use Twitter, that's a PWA. If you want to use Instagram on your computer, that's a PWA as well. And for example, if we take a look to the case study from Starbucks, it says that a PWA has increased daily active users 2 times. Orders on desktops are nearly the same rate as mobile devices. That is insane, right? You know, people, sometimes they just don't like to use all the resources from their phone by installing a native application, and PWAs are extremely lightweight. Cool. So what are some of the superpowers of PWAs? Installability, meaning you can install a PWA on your phone. It's extremely friendly with SEO. Why? Because it's performant, and also at the end of the day, it's a website. So if you know how to integrate SEO into your application, you know how to do it into a PWA because they are the same. They just happen to have superpowers. They're push notifications friendly, and that is due to the service workers, which I'm gonna talk about them in a few seconds. They're extremely performant thanks to the caching strategies. Once again, thanks to the service workers. They're a great user experience because they're mobile friendly. That's the point of progressive web applications. And you know, if your application is fast, your user is happy, and if your user is happy, the user experience is better. They provide offline experience, meaning you're able to use your website offline, meaning if you don't have an internet connection, you can still use it, which that sounds kind of crazy to me, but we're gonna talk about that as well. They're able to process payments, and they're multi-platform, meaning you can use them on your iPad, Mac computer, tablet, mobile phone, whatever. So if you're curious about what can a PWA do today, check out this website right here. It's very cool. So of course, not everything is beautiful with PWAs. I wish it was, because I love them. They were my first love, and they should be my last. Hopefully my future partner never hears that. But so yeah, PWAs have some disadvantages, right? And that's actually me. when I heard that they're not perfect. So they don't have the same access to all the system features as a native application, right? They have a lot of access to, for example, Bluetooth, the Bluetooth API. They have the capacity to use the NFC API and so on, right? They don't have a review standard. And what do I mean with that? So whenever you make a native application, right, you have to deploy it in the App Store. And someone in Apple says, we don't like it, this is trash, and they reject it, right? And that sucks. And that can cost you money and a headache and a few tears. Well, with PWAs, that's not the case. If you can literally deploy your website that says hello.com, it's the same thing with a PWA. You can just like publish it the same way and no problem. Nobody reviews it. Make sense? So another disadvantage is that Apple needs to catch up with tech. That's a classic, right? They don't like PWAs. They are not very friendly with service workers. And I don't know if you knew, but you may think, well, that's a problem with Safari. It's actually, it is. But you might be thinking, well, what about if I install Google Chrome on my iPhone? That could be the solution, right? Because I mean, you know, Google is all the time up to date with PWAs and everything that is trendy with the web. The problem is that Chrome is actually a wrapper for Safari in iPhone devices. So in the background, it's actually Safari doing all the work, meaning it doesn't matter how hard you try to have all the features of a PWA, your PWA is not gonna be fully functioning. Most of the things they are, some things are not. For example, push notifications. Push notifications do not work on iPhones. They work on a Mac, no problem, but it is what it is for iPhones, right? So why I fell in love with PWAs, that's a true story. So let's talk about that. So, you know, a few years ago, I was a consultant and I was working for a company that sadly I cannot say the name because I don't like it. I'm kidding. But they were around 80 countries using this company. But they wanted to go farther. They wanted to reach most of the developing countries. I'm Mexican, right? And one problem that we have in Mexico is internet connection. Internet connection is not very reliable. Meaning if I want to make a purchase, right, from an online store, could be not working because the internet connection could be iffy, right? So PWAs came to the rescue. So we solved the problem by integrating the background sync API, which is extremely friendly with PWAs. Anyone knows what the background sync API is? Nobody? Do you have an idea?
Chrome's way of connecting to the backend or keeping on request to the backend offline.
Yes, that's pretty good. So what he said was essentially the background sync API, what it does is you are trying to make, let's say you're offline and you're able to work with your application like if you were online, right? But you might be thinking, well, how am I actually editing the records in the database if I'm offline, right? You're gonna do it the same way. You know, you're a user, you click delete, and whenever you reach internet connection, the background sync API is gonna trigger those calls that you had in the background, right? You get the internet connection and they send the request for you. It's actually very cool. According to some guys from Google, who are like way smarter than me, every single application should use background sync API. I think it's too much work, but that's what the experts say. And then, well, thanks to PWAs, we were able to reduce the server calls by 32%. Why? Because we used caching strategies using service workers. We increased the number of users by millions. And why? Because most of the people using the application from my previous client, they are in third world countries. And they increased their revenue by 8.8 billion in sales. So that was pretty impressive, and we were able to take the loading time around like roughly 3 seconds. So that's extremely good. Google says that if your application takes more than 4 seconds to load, most likely you're gonna lose 50% of your users. Cool story. Did I change your life? Hopefully I did. So main components of PWAs. So the manifest.json is extremely important. Basically, the manifest.json is what it tells your application how is it gonna look like on your device. The service worker and the actual web app, right? If you don't have a web app, well, you don't have anything. And that is a super cool store that I built for this demo that I'm gonna show you. And this is the manifest.json. So like I said, it's just a JSON file and it has the configuration on how your device is gonna be called. I mean, the application, how your application is gonna be called whenever you install it in your device, right? I hate to write this by hand. What I do, to be honest, just copy paste and that's it. It's essentially gonna be the same configuration for all the progressive web applications. All what you have to do is just change the name. For example, I put React app, which PWAs are friendly with React, Vue, doesn't matter what framework, you can still use PWAs. And the start URL property means that every time that you open your web application, right, with your PWA on your device is always gonna start at certain page or root, right, or the root. So for example, if I open it right now and I go to, let's say, if I go to the shoes section, right, and then I close it and I come back, it's not gonna be in the same page. It's gonna go back to the root, to the home page. And the theme color means how your nav bar is gonna look like, because at the end of the day, native applications have a navigation bar and you can change the color. And the background color is the color of the splash screen. Whenever you install the application on your device, it has a splash screen and you can give it a color. And the icons, well, hopefully that makes sense by itself, but if not, well, the icons are the icons that are gonna be used depending on the size of your device, and that's the icon that your application is gonna be using on your mobile device. So let's talk about service workers. Anyone like service workers? You like service workers? I love them. I think they're like super, super cool. So service worker is essentially a JavaScript file that lives in the background of your browser. Right? They are not the same as just a regular JavaScript file. They live in the background and they do very cool things and they're like very, very powerful. And essentially this is what they are. You have your web application, you have your service worker file living in your browser, and they are between the cache and the network, right? So they live in between your application and they are the ones who call the shots. Meaning they are the boss of your application and they decide how your application is going to behave. But what can a service worker do? Well, they can cache network requests, right? Meaning, for example, if you have a call to the API just to get, I don't know, the list of items that you have in your store, you can just cache it, right? That way you don't have to keep making network calls all the time, which means you're gonna be saving time by not calling AWS, because AWS, everybody knows that it's super expensive, and you're gonna make your application more performant. What else you can do? You can use the background sync API, like I was telling you. You can cache things like assets, meaning like pictures. You can cache your CSS files. You can cache your JavaScript, right? So what do I mean with cache? So what I mean is, instead of actually making the network request to the server to get your JavaScript file, is gonna go to the cache. So meaning it's gonna be instant, right? So your application is gonna be loading almost like in no time. Of course, the first time that you actually go into your website, the first time you're gonna have to make the server calls, right? But after that, everything's gonna be cached. Well, it depends on your caching strategies, but that's the whole point. And thanks to the service workers and the caching strategies, you can use your application online. And thanks to the service workers, you're able to receive push notifications, right? So essentially, the service worker, what it does, since it's living in the background of your browser, the service worker is gonna be asleep, just taking a nap, and then a server sends a signal to the service worker saying, hey, there's a push notification coming, wake up. So the service worker wakes up and triggers the push notification API on your website and shows the message on your device. Working with service workers. Okay, so service workers are actually very complex. because they can do a lot of things and it's very easy to mess up. So hopefully you never have to write a service worker by hand, but if you ever do, I'm gonna talk about the life cycle of the service workers. So essentially, service worker, the first thing to do, the good practice is to check if your navigator supports the service workers, right? If it doesn't support, then you don't want to do anything with them. Another good practice is to, whenever the application has finished loading, right, to trigger the registration of the service worker. This thing right here, which I'm actually going to show you in a real application, lives in a regular JavaScript file. So you know, whenever you do index.js, that's where you're going to put the registration of your service worker. Then the first life cycle of the service worker is installing the service worker, which is actually one of my favorite life cycles, because whenever you are installing the service worker, you can open the cache, right? And tell the cache, hey, these are the assets, these are the files that I want to cache. That way, my application is more performant. So as you can see, I'm using caches. Caches is actually a reserved keyword on your browser. So if you go to Google Developer Tools, you type cache, you're gonna get an object. So what I'm doing right here, oops, I think I click on something. So as you can see, I'm opening the cache, right? You can give the cache name that you want, doesn't matter which one it is. And right here, I'm doing cache.addAll. AddAll is a method that takes an array. So essentially right here, I'm passing an array of files that I want to cache. If you only want to pass one file, you can do that no problem. But I mean, I don't think there's a reason for you to only want to cache one file. So the other one is a fetch one. Like I was telling you, a service worker has a capacity to intercept server calls, right? So let's walk through this code really quick. So essentially what I'm doing is I have a constant called resource, right? And what I'm doing is every time that you get a file from a website, let's say a picture, your JavaScript, your CSS, and so on, is making a network call to get the file, right? Everyone agrees with that? Okay, awesome. So what it's doing is, hey, is this network call existing in my cache, right? Is this line right here, line number 3. And then saves the value in the resource, and then goes right here into this if statement. And if it's true, then that means that that network request is already in my cache. If it's in my cache, then I'm gonna return the value from the cache, the object from the cache. That means that I'm not gonna be using the network request all the time. And then if it doesn't exist in my cache, then I'm actually gonna get the result from the server call. So far, so good? Yeah, awesome. Then they activate, this is another lifecycle method. So essentially, this method helps you to activate the service worker, and it's very common for people to check the name of your cache in here. That way you don't have multiple caches, right? Because at the end of the day, your browser has a capacity, has a size memory, and you don't want to, you know, overflow it, if that makes sense. So essentially, this code, what it's doing, it's comparing the name of your cache, right? Maybe you have a version 2.0, right? That's the name of your new cache. But your old cache is named version 1.0, which is the older one. So what I'm doing right here is I'm comparing the new name of my cache, which is version 2.0, with version 1.0. If it's not the same, right, I'm going to delete the old cache because I don't need it because it's old, right? And that's just taking place in the memory. And this line right here, and as you can see, is just an object, and I'm deleting it just by using the key. And this part right here, the clients.claim, is essentially telling the service worker, hey, before the application wants to do anything, you have the power to take control of my application, meaning you're gonna take control of every single server call. So this line right here is extremely important. So I'm gonna show you this application right here is a regular web application without using Angular, just JavaScript and HTML and CSS, that's it. It's good practice to have your service workers living in the root. They have to live there. By default, you can only have one service worker. If you have two, you're gonna have a problem. There's a few cases that you're gonna have the need of having more than one service worker, right? Is it possible? Hell yeah. All you have to do is import the service workers into one service worker, which is the one in your root file, and combine them. That's all you have to do. So essentially, as you can see, I have my cache name, like I was telling you. This is the version 1.0, and these are all the assets and files that I want to cache. I know I have to do this manually, which sucks, right? That's why you shouldn't be writing service workers by hand, because it's a lot of work. And like I was telling you, here's the first life cycle, which is the install. Here's the fetch one, and here's the activate one, right? So let's look at this application right here. This application, like I was telling you, was built using just vanilla JavaScript. As you can see, it says network and I'm offline. I don't have internet connection, and this application is working as it's supposed to. And if I go to application right here, and I go to cache storage, I can see the name of my cache, which is the one that I give in this section right here. Is everyone following me? Yeah, awesome. So you can see all your files that I have cached, and that is awesome. And if you click on manifest, remember the manifest has all the specifications on how your application is gonna be looking like, right? Whenever you install it on your device. So if you click on the manifest, you're gonna see the values that you gave to your application. And I can confirm that this is a PWA because I can click on this icon right here, and it says, this is the name that I gave it. I know it's really bad, but that's the name. And you can click install, and here's my PWA. Beautiful, right? I'm gonna close that. Oh, you see, I have Twitter installed. I told you Twitter is a PWA. What else? Okay, so we covered that. So now let's talk about the actual Angular PWAs. So I wanted to give you a background on PWAs overall. That way you understand what's actually happening with Angular and the PWAs. So this guy, apparently he's a big shot in the Angular community. If you don't know who he is, he's actually like, he's a core team member. So he's like super smart. And he tells people that apparently if you run ng-add Angular PWA, somehow magically your Angular application turns into a progressive web app. Just like that. One line of code. That's the cool thing about Angular, right? So let's talk about what happens when you run that command. So it adds a package, which is for the service worker from Angular, right? Enables the support of service workers in your CLI. Imports and registers your service worker in the module, so it does that for you. So you see all the steps that I was telling you, hey, you have to register the service worker and write that by hand. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Angular does that for you, and it tells the index.html file, hey, I have created a manifest file for you. Now you can use it. Another thing that you have to do by hand if you're not using Angular or React or anything like that. And what else? And it gives you some icons by default. The icons provided by default are the logos from Angular. Just FYI. And what else? And the most important file right here is the file that is created, which is the ng-sw. SW stands by service worker, FYI, and it's a JSON file. It's not a JavaScript file anymore. So let's talk about that file. That file, like I told you, is a JSON file. And for example, this part right here is the assets group. So in this file, that's where you're gonna specify your caching strategies. So this code that you see right here is created by default by Angular whenever you run the ng-add PWA command. So you don't have to write it by hand. So that's actually really good. And basically what it's doing is the install mode property is giving you the option to decide how you want to cache your assets. And in this case, I want to do prefetch. Prefetch What it means is, hey, make the network call. Once you make it, cache this asset. And as you can see, I'm specifying which files I want to cache. I'm caching all the CSS and JavaScript files. Once again, this is done for me. I don't have to do it by hand. There's another thing that is added by you inside of this array of the assets group, which is another caching strategy in the install mode, which is lazy, right? The lazy is a dynamic caching strategy. Basically, you do not cache anything unless you request it, right? For example, you can cache, I don't know, let's pretend that you have a mobile device and you have certain pictures that should be used only in your mobile application instead of, in a mobile device instead of a desktop, right? So you can cache that only for certain devices. So far, so good? Awesome. And once again, here's like some regex, and you don't have to worry about that. That is provided by you, for you. Data groups. Now, I think this is like super cool. This is how you cache network calls. As you can see, I'm specifying the name, which is just gonna be shoes, and I'm giving it the URL of my API, and I'm specifying what strategy to use, which is performance, right? And I'm specifying the max age. I'm only caching this network call for 1 day. You can change it for weeks, years, or wherever, and the max size, right? The performance, basically what it's doing is caching your assets, your network call. That way you don't have to keep making the network call over and over and over. But if for whatever reason you want to, let's say, have a fresh network call in a week, you're gonna have to change the max age to 1 week, and that's it. And then after a week, it's gonna make the server call. Let's see how we're doing on time. See people clapping, and yeah, I'm doing good. Awesome. Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, I need to rush. And let's see, let's go to the actual PWA from Angular. So let's walk through the files that I told you they get added whenever you run the ng command. So first of all, in your angular.json, right, your angular.json gets aware of this new file that gets added, which is the manifest.webmanifest. Once again, anyone wants to tell me what the manifest.json file does? Wanna raise your hand? What's your name? Yeah. Okay, so wanna tell me what the manifest.json does? It's fine if you don't know, but I've been talking about it, so I give you a sticker if you know. It's fine, and that's 100% fine. The manifest.json, remember, has the specifications of how your application is gonna look in the mobile device or in any device that you install your application. Everyone in the same channel? Awesome, cool. What else? Oh, it tells that Angular that you're gonna have a service worker and that you have now this .json file that has all the service worker configuration. Once again, that is done for you. You don't have to worry about this. Then here's this file, right, that gets added as well. All this code that you see right here gets added by default except this one right here. I added this one manually because I wanted to cache that network call. Everything that you see here on top was added by Angular. So you don't have to worry about the rest, but about caching assets. And here's your manifest file with the specifications of how your application is gonna look like. I have the icons, the short name, the theme color, which are things that I just talked about. And instead of your index.html, it specifies, like, hey, make use of your manifest file. So now let's go into the application.
What was that manifest call said?
Let me see, this one right here. You don't have to worry about that, like they will add it for you. Yeah, so all these things that I'm showing you, the index, the package.json, which adds the service worker, is done for you. This JSON file, they do it for you. And letting Angular know about the service worker and the manifest file, it's done for you. So once again, you don't have to worry about that. That's the cool thing about Angular. They do the majority of the hard work for you, right? Cool thing. So let's go back to my application. So as you can see, here's my store. And if I go here to, once again, it's working offline, right? No problem. And if I go to application, I can see once again my service worker, active and running, activity and running. You're gonna see some errors right here. It's because I was breaking things on purpose, and it registers that. So, but it's actually when I get the call. You good? And well, it's activating and running, so that's good. And as you can see right here, I have all the things that are being cached for me. So I have, as you can see, I'm caching the shoes call, right? And here it is. And if I click in here, here's the data that is being cached. Sounds good? So once again, if you compare what you have to do by scratch by a service worker and what you have to do with your Angular PWA, the work is extremely easy. They do everything for you. So you don't have to worry about building your service worker from scratch, which if you want, you can actually do it, because at the end of the day, an Angular application is just a website and the service workers are friendly with any kind of websites, right? Cool stuff. The other cool thing that you can do with Angular is use I'll show you in a second. Like I was telling you, they installed the service worker package, right? And you can use it. For example, I'm using the SW update, which this helps me notify the user if there has been a change in my application, right? For example, in this code, what I'm doing is, hey, is my service worker enabled? Is it declaring the ng module, right? And is my navigator supports my service worker? Yes. Then I'm gonna go here and do the logic and compare the service worker version, everything that is cached. Something has changed. Then I'm gonna notify my user with a message saying new app version is available. And if they click OK, the application is gonna reload and it's gonna show them the new version instead of showing them the cached old files. So let's give it a try. Hopefully I don't break my demo. So I'm just gonna put right here Angular, and I'm gonna go back to my app. This is my Angular app, network. I'm gonna change it to online now. There you go. It's working offline and online, as you can see. When it says no throttling, that means that you're online, FYI. Another way to put your application offline is by going to Application tab, click on Service Workers, and click Offline right here. That's like a quick way. Cool, so now what I'm gonna do, as you can see, it says ConnectTech. So I'm going to go back to my app. Actually, I'm gonna close this so you guys don't get confused, and I don't get confused either. And I have Angular, I'm gonna save this, and then I'm going to rebuild my application. I have this command that says npm run start PWA, which is a custom command that I give to my progressive web application, which this is what it's doing. ng build -- prod, so it's gonna build my application first, and then it's gonna run this HTTP server. Because the ng serve doesn't work with service workers. So you have to install this package in your computer. That is the package that the Angular team recommends. So use that one or the one that you want, doesn't matter. So let's build the application again. So fingers crossed, my demo works. If it doesn't work, I'm gonna blame Mike right there. So it's his fault. So awesome, up and running. I go back to my application. I refresh the page, and then I'm gonna give it a few seconds to determine if my application has changed something. So as you can see, it says new app version is available. Look at the text right here. It says connect.tech, right? So if I click OK, refreshes the page, and now it says Angular Shop. Sounds good, and that is doable thanks to the package that is included in your application with the service workers.
How does it know
Oh,
the version is available?
with the cache. So now, no. Okay, so we covered this, and well, this is the end of my presentation. I think it was terrible. So if you have anything different to say, so hopefully. So any questions so far? Anyone learn anything? What's up?
The data that you manually create, how does it know which requests you actually cache?
Okay, that's a very good question. So I'm gonna go to this file right here. So every time that you make a server request, right, for getting an image, for getting an API call, it has a URL, right? It has to come from somewhere. So this is how it knows. Because I'm specifying, hey, this is the URL I'm trying to cache, make sure to cache it. So far, so good?
Is that like a CDN or something?
I can hear you.
Is that like a CDN for the?
Oh, I thought I thought it was you. Okay, I'm sorry. This is not a CDN. This is just an API that I made with Firebase, and if we want to open it up, that's what it is.
So is there a lot of configuration that would come using a service work on like Android WebView as opposed to just like a phone?
If you want to install your PWA into your Android device, no, it's the same. Yeah. I don't know if they're clapping at me or it's in another place. I don't hear you.
Can you do pattern matching on that URL, or do you have to have an explicit URL?
That's a very good question. I have never tried that. If you want, do me a favor, reach out to me on Twitter in like 2 days, and I will have the answer for you. Sounds good?
Related to the cache that you were mentioning, if I set, for example, 1 day that it is going to be the max age for that, and I don't open my application for the next 3 or 4 days, what's going to happen in the background? I mean, after 1 day, is it going to make a request, or after I open again the application?
No. So okay. So what's gonna happen is your application, you're not gonna be using your app, right, for let's say 5 days, and you told the cache to be cached for 1 day, right? That is like in the caches. Let me see if I can actually show you. Is it? Okay, so you see this date, it registers that, right? So if you open your application in 5 days, it's gonna compare the date that you try to cache your URL or your assets or wherever, and it's gonna be like, oh, wait, hold on. It's a new day where 5 days past the day that you try to cache your assets or your URL or wherever, I'm gonna make the server call.
Okay, so it is not going to run on a daily basis.
No,
Okay,
no.
so the next time you open the
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You mentioned the limitations of PWA on iOS, like push notifications.
That's one.
This background thing.
I haven't tried in background sync API on, but we can check it out. Let's see.
It would be Chrome on iOS because background sync isn't all browsers.
We can check it out. Why don't we do it right now? So what is the name of the website? It's Can I Use, right? Okay, so let's see. So Safari doesn't like it, and only Chrome, essentially. Did I answer your question? Cool.
I don't know if you're going to be familiar, but are PWA service workers different from electron service workers? Or how does that like PWA versus electron kind of shake out?
I have never worked with Electron. I know a guy right here that works for Ionic. Maybe he's familiar with Electron. Mike, are you familiar with Electron?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna answer the question and you tell me if I'm wrong. At the end of the day, I mean, service workers, they do the same. They should be working the same, but I could be wrong. So? I mean, I don't know how Electron works, so yeah, I have no idea. More questions? No? Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Hopefully you learned something.